All right, good evening. We are on Daf Hey Amud Aleph. We are at the very top of a mesve, and we have to remember that we discussed yesterday about Rav, and we had mentioned that the Mishnah in Zvachim had told us that a chatas or a that a chatas, if I change it from what it's supposed to be to a different type of korban, so then that becomes puzzle. So Rav comes along and he suggests that there is another type of offering that if it doesn't satisfy for the sake of its owner, that the korban actually becomes completely puzzle and no good, despite the fact that we didn't bring that up in the Mishnah in Maseches Zvachim, which is like, now it's like where you have like a sequel to the movie and they go back and they change the whole thing that you already knew, right? So we know that the chatas is the only one, but apparently he says no, that an asham that is a korban which is a machshir, meaning that the korban is not as a kapara, but it comes to serve as allowing a person to complete whatever process, whether they're a nazir and finishing their being a nazir, or they are a zav or a zava, or there's somebody who, all of these have korbanos at the conclusion of their processes, and when they conclude their process, they bring a korban. That korban is not an atonement korban; it's a mukshar korban. It moves them from one status to the next status. So he had said that if a korban that moves somebody from one status to the next status doesn't fulfill its purpose of moving that person from one status to the next status, then that korban is worthless and it doesn't count for anything. How could we have such a thing? So, for example, if I do a korban shelo lishma, if I do a korban not for the sake of the korban, so then it doesn't work for the owner. That's what we have been saying constantly all along. Well, he says then by extension to that, if it doesn't work for its owner, then this korban has no purpose, and then the korban is completely invalid. That was what Rav had said. And we had asked a few questions. Now we're going to ask one more question to start our day. Meisvei. Here's the final question on Rav. Asham mitzorah shenishchat shelo lishmo. Here's a brisa. It says that if I have a korban asham of somebody who has tzaras, and I shecht it shelo lishmo, not for the right sake, o shelo nitan midamo agabe behonos, or some other invalidation occurs, like, for example, you don't take from its blood and put it on the ear, the thumb, or the toe of the person who has tzaras. Hareze ole legabe mizbeach, the korban is valid in the sense that you can bring it to the mizbeach. Also, v'ton nisachim, the korban is valid in the sense that you have to bring with the flour offerings and the wine offerings and everything that goes with it. But since you changed and decided it wasn't for the purpose of this person, it wasn't for the purpose of this korban as an asham, it doesn't count. You need another korban asham in order for this person to complete his process. Now, that is a question on Rav, because Rav had said that if it doesn't work for the person, then the korban is completely invalid and we don't bring it. This brisa says exactly the opposite of Rav. Despite the fact that it doesn't work for the person, we continue to bring the nesachim of the korban, we continue to bring the rest of the korban. So that, the Gemara says, is tiyufta de Rav. You're right. This brisa clearly indicates not like Rav. Now, that sounds, right? The Gemara, we have, Rav is a Amora who lives right on the very edge of the history between the Mishnah and the Gemara. He's very early Amora.
So it's a big deal to say to
That's exactly right. So therefore, right, the Tosfos here says, Tiyuvta, Havi Matzi Lamema Rava Tanahu Apolig. The Gemara could have answered, Rav is arguing against the Brisa, because he's allowed to do that, Kidekamar Bekamadukti, like we say in several places in Shas. Right? So it's good to note that Tosfos picks up on the fact that Rav has a problem from the Brisa is less of a problem to Rav than it is to any other Amora who could not argue with the Brisa. Okay? So Tosfos comments. Fine. Next, we have position number 2. On this, we're going to see that we talked about Rav. The preview of the next page or so, now that I've prepared it, is that there are going to be 3 positions. We had this Korban HaOmer, this Mincha, right? That's brought on the second day of Pesach. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to permit all of the wheat from last year, move it over from being chadash to yashan. So now we can eat it. That's what happens after we bring this korban. So what if I bring it shalol lishma? If I do this korban shalol lishma, so that's where Rav said, if I do it shalol lishma, since it can't work for the Jewish people who are trying to create the permissibility of eating this wheat, it's a mukshar which doesn't work for its owners, and then the entire korban is worthless. So Rav says the entire korban is no good, you don't continue to bring it. That was Rav's opinion, but we've just refuted Rav. Now we're going to have position number 2 on what happens. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says, Minchas ha'omer, if I've got this korban mincha, shekmatza shelo lishma, and the Kohen does kmitza for a different sake of a different korban, kshera, it is kosher, the korban is kosher. However, right, it doesn't, since it's shelo lishma, it's not going to count for permitting all of the rest of the grain for Kahal Yisrael. V'shiyareha ein necholin ad shetavo minchas ha'omer acheres v'tatirena. So you're going to wind up with a problem. This korban mincha was brought with the new barley. That's what makes it a permitter, is that you take the new barley, you bring korban with it, and now all of the barley that was stored is now permitted. Well, if this korban, which I bring with the new barley, is now brought and doesn't work to permit all the new barley, the rest of this korban is now made of new barley. Nobody can eat it. So therefore, you're going to finish the korban, and then you have to hold on to it until you do another korban of korban omer. Once that one is done, then this korban ha'omer is now able to be eaten and consumed.
I don't know if this is the right place to ask about yashan.
Yeah, no, this is the perfect place to ask about yashan.
Right time or place.
Yes.
I know you see often, I know nothing about yashan. I know that you see when you go to places, it says that this is whatever, it's Chaz Yisrael and yashan.
Yes.
Which makes it sound like that's not a requirement, but a chumrah.
That's what it sounds like, yes.
And so, I'm just wondering.
So the answer is, of all of the things, like people are keeping Kahal Yisrael and keeping, it seems like yashan is the biggest chutz la'aretz requirement. There doesn't seem to be, we're going to see a Gemara that we're going to come up when we turn the page about yashan and chutz la'aretz and how it might be reasonable to not eat yashan and chutz la'aretz. The first only Gemara that says something potentially like it. I don't know if we'll have time to go into it in some detail, but I want to bring more into it. Maybe that's what the WhatsApp group will be for, to be able to send some yashan notes and some WhatsApp about some information about yashan in chutz la'aretz. But that is the key critical question. We have never indicated, we have no place to show us that yashan in chutz la'aretz should be permissible. Right? There's no reason to say we eat the new grains. And we keep Kahal Yisrael, and then these people who are keeping yashan have to look up serial codes, and it's so complicated. I had somebody coming over my house for Shabbos who keeps yashan, and I don't. So, but you keep yashan, right? No, okay. So he's like, obeying me. So people keep it it's like people treat it like a chumrah, and you read through the halachos, it's kind of dicey of all the ones to keep, right? Yashan seems to be one that there's a strong reasoning to presume that it's deoraisa and that it's required and that people don't keep it. So it's interesting. It's one of those leniencies in halacha that just is in practice.
You have a lot of people out there who are very machmir with yashan.
So people who are machmir and yashan, and so those people are out there. You have to do they sit there with their cereals and the dates, and they've got these cards up, and you can have Cheerios after this date, and you can have your this until this date. It's got last ones.
Go for the kamikema. Go for sure yashan.
So therefore, so this is
yashan would be stricter in Eretz Yisrael.
There doesn't seem to be anybody who holds that yashan is permissible in Eretz Yisrael, right? But the question, even in chutz la'aretz, it doesn't seem yashan is not a mitzvah tluya ba'aretz. It's not really dependent like truma or meiser, even though we sort of treat it like that. But so let's presume that for the sake of our Gemara and things, that yashan is a requirement, and then we'll try to figure out in the chat why it is that we're not doing it.
Someone might send out a message about it eventually.
If anyone wants to take it on, I don't know who, I might convert myself, but I just, it's one of those things. So now, This korban now, again, so we're bringing this korban ha'omer, and I have brought it, but it didn't work. So now I'm stuck because it was brought with the new grain, which I can't eat. So I put it over here, go get another korban, make a new korban ha'omer. That is going to permit the grain to be eaten, and then I can go back and consume the remnants of the first korban. Okay, so now, the Gemara wants to know, we have a problem though, because Reish Lakish suggests that the first korban can still be brought, despite the fact that once it's brought, I still can't eat it. Mikrav hechi karva, how can you bring this korban? Mimashke Yisrael, the pasuk in, I think it's in Yechezkel. Yeah, pasuk in Yechezkel, right? Pasuk is in Yechezkel that says,
5:15, Yechezkel.
right, it says, V'seh achas min atzon min hamasayim mimashke Yisrael lemincho olo l'shalom lechaper aleim ne'um Hashem Elokim. He's telling him, talking about this, the korbanos that you're supposed to take, and it says you're going to take this from one seh, from the tzon, which is from the mashke Yisrael. Mashke means that which the people can eat. Mashke means literally, mashke is a drink.
When we put the mashke nowadays, we're talking about the alcohol.
Alcohol, right, is the mashke, right? But mashke is also referring to a festive meal. That's what the alcohol often makes it the festive meal, but it includes anything at the meal, which tells us that a korban must be brought of edible items. I can't use non-kosher products in my korban. So this barley is inedible. It's not permissible. So how can I have a kosher korban with inedible barley?
You boil it and then you make it soft, and then
It does not matter because it's chadash. It has not the korban ha'omer hasn't been brought yet. So that's what the problem with it is. Amar Ravada Barava says, Kasava Reish Lakish ein mechuser zman lebo bayom. Ravada Barava's answer is that Reish Lakish must be of the opinion that if it's going to be fixed sometime later today, that's okay. Okay, it's now is before the time it got fixed. That's irrelevant. Basically, you look and say, as long as I'm going to bring the korban later today, this barley is okay right now. So we're going to question that a couple of times. Meisiv Rav Ada, Breda Rav Yitzchak. Rav Ada, the son of Rav Yitzchak, not the Rav Ada we just had, right? Different Rav Ada. The first was Rav Ada Bar Ava. This is Rav Ada Bar Yitzchak, who asks about that. Yesh ba'ofos she'ein b'menachos v'yesh b'menachos she'ein ba'ofos. There are some differences in the halachos of bringing korbanos from birds, as there are halachos that are bringing korbanos by menachos. I love these because they test your knowledge. These are none of these things are things we didn't know, but when you compare and contrast, it clarifies things. Yesh ba'ofos, you know what rules we have by birds? Sha'ofos ba'im b'nidva shnayim. We know that birds can come from partners. If two people want to get together and bring a korban together, people can bring a korban together. But that is not the case. We're going to learn later on in Maseches Menachos. Partners cannot bring a korban mincha. Mincha has to be from a single individual. Mechusrei kapara. Also, you could have a zav or a zava or a yoledes or a mitzora. They're called mechusrei kapara because they still have an offering to bring in order to permit themselves. So they can bring bird offerings. They can still bring bird offerings. The hutru mikal isuran bakodesh. And also, because why? Because the bird offering, another thing about the bird is that which prohibits it makes it a kosher korban, malika. Right? Malika makes a bird non-kosher generally. But when it comes to korbanos, that is going to permit it. Right? Masha Enkeim b'menachos. These are not the same rules as menachos, and menachos doesn't follow the rules. Doesn't follow those rules. Yesh b'menachos. Here are some rules that apply to korban minchos that don't apply to birds. Shamenachos to unos kli. Right? Mincha offerings need a utensil. Birds don't need a utensil. Remember, you just do malika and throw the blood right from the bird onto the mizbeach. Tenufa, you wave a korban mincha. You don't wave a bird. Hagasha, you take the bowl that you put the kmitza and you touch it to the korban, to the mizbeach. You don't do that by the bird. Yeshnam betzibur kebiyachid. There's public offerings that are mincha offerings. There are private offerings that are mincha offerings. There are no bird offerings that are public offerings. Mashen kibofos. So now, the im isa, if Reish Lakish were holding like what you said, that that Reish Lakish is holding that a korban omer which was brought shalol lishma would be prohibited to be eaten, right? Because of its chadash until you bring the other korban. B'menachos nami mishkachas la, there would be another difference, and that is dehutru mikal isuran bakodesh, that you would have a circumstance where that which permits it is prohibited by Kodesh Umay Nihu Minchas Omer. He says that if you bring a Korban Omer, which is Shalo Lishma, so that means a person could not eat it because it's Chadash, but it still can be used as a Korban, which wouldn't be the case by a bird. You'd never have a bird that was not kosher to a person, and you could still bring it as a Korban. So there would be another difference between a mincha, because what Ravada Bar Ava has said is, despite the fact that this korban cannot be consumed by a person, since you're going to bring the korban omer later on in the day, this one you could still bring it as a korban. So the Gemara answers no. That's not how we look at it, because the way we're actually looking at it is that once we're saying that it's going to be permitted by another korban ha'omer later on today, it's not prohibited even for the individual. I mean, the individual, this korban mincha has no prohibited element to it, and the first one has no prohibited element to it at all. It's being taken care of, and it's in process, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that is.
Are you supposed to do tenufa for every mincha, or you do it to?
You do actually. I think you do tenufa for all menachos. Well, let's see as we go through. But that's my recollection.
Okay, is there a korban marv at all?
That's a good question, and we know that Mariv does not have a corresponding korban. Right? In Mesachas Brachos, we talk. It's good to be able to point out that we have the korban tamid of Shachris, and we have a korban tamid of the after. We have a korban tamid in the afternoon. There is no Mariv korban, right? And the Mariv korban is alluded to in that we burn the fats of the korbanos overnight, right? But there is no specific korban which was brought at the time of evening, which would be corresponding. The word mincha, right, isn't to be confused with our mincha, because our mincha is the olas mincha, right? It's the korban ola that is brought in the afternoon, which is actually a korban, which is actually a zevach, which is an animal, right? The korban mincha ben arbayim.
I read that mincha.
No, is it a mincha ben arbayim? The tamid shel ben arbayim is a mincha. Yeah, maybe we'll see. But that's why it's called a mincha. But yeah,
I forget where I read it, but the mincha Yaakov gave Esav a matana mincha. It means a gift.
Yes, mincha literally just means a gift.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the brothers gave Yosef mincha, a gift of mincha, whatever they brought. So it's a gift.
Correct, and that's what it means. So therefore, don't confuse the mincha, tfilas mincha, with this mincha.
Right.
Mesiv Rav Sheshas. So Rav Sheshas asked the following question: Hiktim matan hashemen lematan hadam. Okay, now what you have suggested, right? Rav Ada bar Ava's answer to the problem on Reish Lakish is, if it's going to be brought later today, it's fine, right? Doesn't invalidate time. You don't need A to come before B. You just need A to happen at some point during the day so that B is permissible. Now, here's the problem with that. When it comes to the korban of the person who has tsaras, so if you first did the matan shemen lematan dam, part of his process of becoming purified is he has his ear, he puts some blood of the korban asham and on his ear, thumb, and toe, and then he puts oil on his ear, thumb, and toe. So what if you put the oil on first before the blood? So what do? So then yimal enu shemen v'yachzor v'yitain shemen achar matan hadam. Doesn't help. You got to go back, fill the oil back up, and then you do it again. The blood of the asham must precede the oil of the mitzorah. Matan bahonos lematan sheva. Also, let's say you start the application of the oil before you've sprinkled the blood. You sprinkle the oil, right? You're sprinkling the oil by the Kodesh HaKodashim, right? You're supposed to sprinkle it first before you apply it on the mitzorah. Let's say you do that first. Doesn't count. Yimal enu sheman, you've got to refill it again. V'yachzor v'yitain matan ba'onos achar matan sheva. And you have to throw the oil first, and then you go back and make the application to the mitzorah, which means the order matters. Now, v'amart ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. If Reish Lakish is right, I'll take care of it at some point during the day. It doesn't matter which one comes first. My yachzor v'yitain, my david avid. Who cares? Why do you have to go back? What you did is done. Just do the service that was supposed to precede it later on in the day, and that should be fine. So the answer is, Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Shani Hilchos Mitzora. You're right, generally that's right, but when it comes to Tzaras, the halacha is different. The Dechsiva Behu, the pasuk specifically says, Havaya. The pasuk needs to be done in that order. The Amar HaKosav, the pasuk says, Zos Tiyeh Toras HaMitzora. This is the way that the prescripted order of the rules of the Mitzora. Tiyeh Behavaya. Behavayasa Tehei. It must be in this form. It cannot go out of order. Generally, order is not really a problem except here. That's the answer.
Really, the Torah described it in that order. You would have thought that that's the order it wants it to be done.
And the answer is that if you have a general principle which says, as long as it's done during the day, who cares? The Torah therefore has to specify that the order is important.
Okay.
Mesiv Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, okay, I'll ask you from another place. Hiktim chataso le'ashamo. Okay, now let's say, for example, this person is finishing up his mitzora. Okay, he has tzaras, and he brings his chatos before his asham. Now, that's not the right order, right? The asham should come first. So lo yiyeh acher memoris bidma. Rather, what you shouldn't think to do is, you know what I'll do is, I'll get somebody just to keep stirring the blood of the chatos. I'll go do the asham, and then I'll come back and do the chatos afterwards. Don't do that. Once you've shechted that chatos, it's no good. You haven't done the asham yet. Therefore, this chatos is no good. So you got to get rid of it. Problem is, you can't just get rid of this. You can't just burn it because it's a kosher korban right now. So what you do is, ela to uber tzurasa, you have to leave it until it gets a separate psul. Like leaving it until it becomes dark out at night. Once it's at night, it's puzzle be lina, and now it becomes, because it gets past its zman, and now that it's past its zman, now you can burn it. Therefore, teitze lebeis asrefa, then you burn it. Now, amai, why should that be? Kamosiv Rav Papa. So why is Rav Papa asking this question? Rav Papa already answered the question. He said the rules are different by mitzora. Hey, let me ask you another question. What about a mitzora? You just answered already that mitzora goes in order. Rav Papa no, but this is what Rav Papa means to ask. Ema hani mili avoda. I would have thought that when the Torah says the order of the mitzora matters, that's when it comes to holy temple service. The service must be in order. Shchita lav avodahi. Shchita is not a temple service. Why? Because we said a Kohen doesn't have to do that. A regular non-Kohen could do that as well. We did have that machlokas and discussion in Maseches Zvachim, whether Shchita is an avoda or it's not. In some ways it is, and in some ways that it isn't. So we might have thought Shchita is not really an avoda, therefore it doesn't have to go in order. And if I did Shchita of the chatos, it would not invalidate that. And therefore we would ask the question, if it doesn't matter which comes first, as long as it occurs during the day, why couldn't somebody just stir the blood, keep it going, I'll go do the yasham and I'll come back to it, right? And then, because you said that the service of the mizbeach does matter, I'll do all of the services, the avoda of the chatos, in order after the yasham. So lakriv asham v'hadar likriv achatos. I go to the asham first and come back to the chatos. Ella amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, no. Hainu taima dereish lakish. I'll tell you. So therefore, that's Rav Papa's point. And therefore, he says, I don't like Rav Ada Barava's answer that as long as it happens during the day, it's fine. I'll give you a better answer. Hainu time in the Reish Lakish. I'll tell you why Reish Lakish holds that the Korban HaOmer, which is invalid, can still be eaten despite the fact it doesn't count as a Korban HaOmer and it doesn't permit anything. And now we've got barley that's not permitted. Why are you allowed to eat it? Because Reish Lakish he's of the opinion, da kasavar, Heir Mizrach Matir. We're going to see later on when we're going to discuss this Korban HaOmer in greater detail, that at what point is all of the previous year's grain permitted? So we might have thought that it is when the Korban is brought. Reish Lakish says, no, sunrise. As soon as sunrise comes up on the day that you're supposed to bring the Korban HaOmer, all of the old wheat is fine. Nowadays, we don't bring a Korban. So when does the grain change from Chadash to Yashan?
We see Korbanos before Shachar, some people.
That's also true, but we're talking about on the Korban HaOmer, we're saying that we have to, on sunrise of the 16th of Nisan, all previous year's grain is now permissible. Don't need a korban. Reish Lakish says that was always the case, even during the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Damri Tavaihu, is Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they hold, Afilu Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayam, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, Heir Mizrach Matir, as soon as it got light out on the 16th, all of the Chadash was permissible. Therefore, even if you brought this invalid offering, Reish Lakish says, go ahead and eat it, because it's permitted already, no problems. We don't need it to come on into any of the other issues of bringing the Korban Omer later or any of those things. It's just taken care of. Now, the Had Reish Lakish la befei Reish Itmar. That which Reish Lakish holds this way wasn't written explicitly, ela miklala Itmar. Rather, we derived that Reish Lakish holds that way from other things that he said. And that is, Ditznan, we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah that we're going to discuss it in greater detail on Daf Samach Ches, Amabez. Ein Mevian Menachos.
Which is a long time from now.
Which is not that long, depending, it's 2 months. 2 months. Ein Mevian, it's relatively speaking, there's other things I have to wait longer. To talk about Ma'ariv, I should have told you to wait 1.5 years. 2 years. Ein Mevian Menachos Ubikurim, right? The Mishnah says you're not supposed to bring Menachos, and the first fruits, and minchas behema, or the mincha offerings that come with an animal, kodem laomer, before you bring the korban haomer. The korban haomer allows the new fruits to be brought, the new grain to be brought. If you bring a korban mincha or the bikurim, or a mincha for another korban from the new grain before the korban omer, then that korban is not valid. Now, v'im hevi, and if you do bring that before the korban, before the omer, it's pasul. You brought chadash. You cannot use chadash in your korban. Kodem l'shtei halechem. Now, furthermore, there's another rule. When it comes to individual people, so for us, the moment that the new grain becomes old and I can eat it is the second day of Pesach. For korbanos, it's actually the shtei halechem. It's on Shavuos. So for korbanos, you can't use the new grain for another 50 days, 48 days, 49 days, right, until you get to Shavuos. Kodem l'shtei halechem lo yavi. If you use the new grain before you bring the shtei halechem on Shavuos, you're also, you can't bring them.
Is that because the korbanos only have wheat, right?
Yes.
That's the reason, right? But
barley becomes pretty.
Sometimes it makes this. You could eat barley after Omer, right?
You could eat it, but you can't. But nothing can be used as a korban from it.
But could a regular person, a yachid, eat
wheat?
Wheat,
yes.
After the barley of Menachos.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
So it's more an issue of it's more of an issue by bikurim, because the pasuk says korban rashis. It's called a korban rashis. It should be the first of the korban to use the new produce. Now. V'im hevi kosher, but for that one, if you do bring it, it's still kosher now because it's edible, right? People can eat it, so therefore, even though you're not supposed to bring korban with it, if you did, it's kosher. From Rabbi Yitzchak Reish Lakish, says in Reish Lakish, Lo shanu elabar ba'asar ubechamishasar. That which we're talking about, it being possible on the 14th of Nisan or the 15th of Nisan. Aval b'shishasar. But if I bring my korban on the 16th of Nisan, in heavy kosher, it becomes kosher now, right? Now, Alma Kasavar here, Mizrach Matir. Doesn't say that if he brings it on the 16th after they already brought the korban ha'omer, then it's okay. It's once it's the 16th, it's okay. So if I wake up in the morning on the 16th and my korban, the menachos, I bring my mincha together with my olas hashachar, and I use new grain, according to Reish Lakish, it's okay. Not supposed to, but it's okay because it's kosher because it's already after the 16th. Okay, so that is.
It's okay, but it's not advisable, basically.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. More than not advisable. I would call it maybe a bittul aseh, right? It's a positive commandment that the first thing should be from the shtei halechem. I would presume it's a bittul aseh. V'Rava Amar. Now. That's so we've had two different opinions. What happens with this korban omer that I bring shalol lishma? Rav said it was completely worthless, right? It doesn't count, and nobody can eat it. Reish Lakish said, no, people can still bring it and eat it, but it doesn't count. Now, third version. Rava Amar minchas omer shekmatz shalol lishma keshera. It is kosher. V'shayareh necholin ve'en tzricha minchas omer acheres la'atira, and I don't even need another korban minchas omer. It's fine. It works. You decide to change it, does not matter. Why? She'ein machshava mo'elas elo b'mi she'roi la'avoda uvedavar ha'roi la'avoda ubemakom ha'roi la'avoda. Because invalidating intent requires three things. It requires a person who is fit to perform the service. It requires an item which is fit to perform the service, and it has to be done in the place which is fit to perform the service. Now, what are we talking about, those three things? B'mi shiroi la'avoda, who's a person who's fit for doing the service? Lavuke kohen bal mum, not a kohen that has a mum. If I have a kohen who has a mum, who has an intent to say that this is the wrong korban, his intent means nothing, because he's not really anybody who's supposed to be able to do the service anyway. Bedavar haroi lavod is something that is appropriate to the surface with. Lafuke minchas haomer. That is going to exclude this korban minchas haomer. Why? De lo chazia, de chidushu. This produce is itself unfit to be a korban. It is the korban, but it is itself unfit because it's the chadash. So until this korban is brought, it is unfit to be brought, except that it's being brought. It's a little bit of a paradox, if you're thinking about it, which we're going to discuss in a moment. But since it has that paradox, it's ineligible to be brought as a korban. Changing it to be a different korban is irrelevant. It's immune. It's protected from invalidating thought. And also, b'makom haroi lavuda lafoki nifgam hamizbeach. It needs to be in a place which is appropriate. Means that if the mizbeach has a blemish on it, and therefore you couldn't be bringing a korban at that time, so therefore
how did Mizbech have a blemish over a korban?
we had our example when they were throwing the esrogim at that Suduki, remember, and they broke it. So if that happens, if you have a bad intent during that time, it would be meaningless. Okay, so then you can once you fix it, then you can then bring it afterwards again.
How can something be yashan early that early in the spring, unless it was from the previous year?
Barley apparently grows very fast.
It's growing in the springtime.
Yes.
Doesn't wheat also?
Wheat takes a little bit longer, right? Wheat would. I remember I had in my last round of Daf Yomi, I had a fellow who had done some farming in Eretz Yisrael, and he had mentioned that there's potentially two, because there's winter wheat and then there's summer wheat, and the winter wheat does start growing over the winter and it doesn't ripen, but it's not ripe yet, and it was still confusing to me. Wow. But yes, seasonally speaking, barley is the first thing that ripens, and therefore that's why this is being brought from the korban. But remember, you're talking about all the summer wheat that you harvested during last year's season. You're just putting it in your storehouses and you're not using it.
So you can't eat that the whole winter.
Correct.
You have to eat the previous year.
So once the korban omer is brought, then you have a whole agricultural season. Everything you harvest after that point gets put in the storehouse and stays there. And then next year, when you bring korban omer, you open that and you use that.
Will you get moldy by then?
No. Grain apparently stays nice in the storehouse, right? You avoid it from
dry.
Keep it dry, keep it away from rodents,
Right.
and you're in good shape.
Nowadays, it's easier said than done nowadays.
So yashan is just grain that was already.
That was grown in tough. If you have all the grain that was grown before Pesach, all the way back, harvested, and is in your storehouse, comes that day, open the storehouse, all that is now permitted. Everything that I cut out of the ground from the day after Pesach on gets put in the storehouse for next year.
Right. That's how it was always explained to me. The yashin is grain that celebrated Pesach.
Yes.
It's seen a Pesach.
Now, that's great for economics because I know how much grain is in the economy that year. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I can set reasonable prices and ration the produce so that we don't wind up with runs and shortages, right? We wind up we know the total amount, the total product that we're selling for the year, and therefore the grain sellers know that if we have small amounts, we're going to raise the prices in order for it to last longer, and people will eat less this year, right? But if we have more, then we can sell it at plentiful lower prices and sell it with no problems. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Our rabbis learned. Okay, let's talk about another similar idea where we've got something where we just learned that there's something which is prohibited for the Mizbeach, prohibited, but yet permitted, right? This Korban Omer, okay. Tana Rabbanan Rabbis on Kishu, Omer min ha-bakar. The pasuk in the Ola, beginning of Vayikra, right at the beginning, Parak Aleph Pasuk Base. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lashem. A person brings a korban. Min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzon. He can bring from an animal. Why does it just say he brings an animal, a bakar, a tzon? Every time it says min, it comes to tell me some types of animals are good, others are not. And we learn in these drashos that the types of animals that you can't bring are animals that had relations with a person. Also animals that were worshipped as Avodah Zarah. Animals that were set aside for Avodah Zarah. Every time it has a min, we exclude another type of animal. And Keshu Omer, then this Mishnah in Bechoros, is it? Right. This says that Keshu Omer, when the pasuk says in pasuk Gimel, min habakar, from the bakar, lemata, right? It already said that in last pasuk, min habakar. Why is it saying it again? It's telling us another type of animal to exclude. Shein tamid lomar, I don't need to write it, ella lahotzi es a treifa, to tell me, there's another type of animal you can't bring. You can't bring for a korban an animal which is a treifa. A treifa is an animal, as we will see when we get to Chulin and discuss all of these items, that has some kind of injury in it that makes it so that it is non-recoverable. It has limited lifespan following the injury.
So that animal has a permanent mum, or whatever it is.
Well, we don't want to use the same word as mum, because mums are external. Mm-hmm. Trephos can very often be internal, right? A hole in the lungs, a hole in the trachea, digestive tract issues.
You normally only find that out.
And you might find that out after you shecht it, correct. Now, there are trephos that are visible, right?
The animal could have had cancer, for example.
Correct, yeah. So if you have some significant blemishes that are on the inside, so then that's what makes it a trephos. So we don't want to call it a mum, because it's a distinctive separate category. Because a Baal mum, we do say, also have separate pasuk that tells us that you can't bring an animal that has a mum. Right. But a treifa cannot be brought from this pasuk. Ve'hala dinu. Now, why do I need a pasuk? I could make a kal v'chomer and figure out myself that I shouldn't bring that one. Because umal Baal mum shehu muteres lehedyot. When it comes to a Baal mum animal, that's kosher. I can eat that for my steak dinner, right? An animal has got cataracts. Does not matter to me. It's still delicious. So therefore, asura, right, medium rare, asura legavoha, but I cannot use it as a korban. Trefa asura hedyot. If I have an animal which is trefa, which a person cannot eat, can't shecht it and use that in your barbecue. Einodin shasura legavoha. Sure, for sure, I can't use it as a korban. Now, the reason we're sort of bringing it, sort of jump to the punchline just to point out, because it should be gnawing at us already. The reason why a trefa should not be allowed is because we already learned the rule of mashke Yisrael, that you need to have something which is permitted to be eaten in order for it to be a korban. We're going to get to that point at the end. That's sort of why we're bringing this issue up, in order to be able to discuss this concept, or doing the same thing as this korban ha'omer, where we're using something that we cannot eat in our korban, and nevertheless it's valid. And we're also doing the same thing but we don't do that otherwise. We have these rules. So how come by a treifa? We need a special pasuk to teach us that a treifa is no good, despite the fact that a treifa shouldn't be good because you can't eat it, right? That's our definition of the thing you can't eat. Everyone said, no, that's treif, right? So treif is, I can't eat it. So no, we're going to excuse that issue until the end. So why don't I look at the fats and blood? That should prove it. Those also can't be eaten. But I can use those. Those are very essential parts of a korban, right? I throw the blood and I burn the fats. So they're okay for a korban despite the fact that people can't eat them. Yeah, but fats and blood come from a kosher animal. The rest of the animal is fine. Right? Tomer betreifa, how could you compare it to a treifa? Shekula asur, the entire animal is not kosher. So you can't eat any of the animal. So lo tehmu teres legavoa, so it shouldn't be permissible, the treifa.
Even in kosher animals, they have the forbidden fats you can't eat.
That is true, but they get burned. Then the question would be, why can you burn them on the mizbeach if you can't eat them? The answer is because they're coming from a kosher animal at the end of the day. Therefore, it's different than a treifa. Malika tochiach. What about a bird that has had malika? Shekula iser, vasur lehedyot. The whole bird is now prohibited, and a person cannot eat it. And nevertheless, muteres legavoa. It's kosher as a korban. So yeah, but mala malika shen kedusha sa usarta. But that malika is different because the reason you're doing the malika is in order to make it holy. That is the process of the korban. So therefore, masha ein kain betrefa, which is not the same case by a trefa she'ein kedusha so usarta. That the slaughtering of it isn't the thing that prohibited it. The prohibition is from the trefa, which was inside of it. See, the malika is the problem and the solution, right? The trefa is the problem, the shchita is the solution. Those are not the same things. You can't do that. Now, vim he shavta. Now, if you would have refuted this kal v'chomer, which we didn't incidentally, right? The kal v'chomer still stands, right? So keshu omer min bakar lemata shein tamid lomer lahotzias trefa. So you would have a pasuk that says min bakar to tell me that not even a trefa. Now that's a really strange line to write at the end of your brisa. Your brisa says, right? I should have learned it. I should have learned trefa from a kal v'chomer, and then we tried a couple of kal v'chomers. And we couldn't find we couldn't find a kal v'chomer, and therefore we had this kal v'chomer, right? We didn't have it, and then it says, and if you could push off the kal v'chomer, so then we have a pasuk. Well, why don't you just? What was the push off? So Rav says, right? In other words, what was the kal v'chomer? The kal v'chomer is if a balmum can't be a korban, then for sure treifa can't be a korban. And we were trying to bring proofs and differences, but we never threw that off. So the Mishnah the Brisa, although it doesn't tell us, seems to imply that you could have answered against the kal v'chomer. So now, what is the answer against that kal v'chomer? So Rav says, Mishum dikla mimer, you could have answered minchas ha'omer tochiach. The mincha of the omer can prove it to you. Why? Because she'asur lehedyot muteres lagavoha. The mincha of the omer is made of chadash, new produce. Obviously not holding like Reish Lakish. It's made of new produce, and therefore a person could not eat it, and yet it's kosher for a korban. Yeah, but that's not a proof because Ma'ala Minchas HaOmer Shekein Materes Chadash, the Minchas HaOmer is in itself permitting the new product. It's a little bit of a paradox, right? But it is the problem and the solution, right? But it's a paradox. It's prohibited, but it's also permitting. So, but the treifa, right, is not permitting anything. So therefore, how can you compare the two? So the answer is Bashvias. What if we're talking about Shemitah year? And so now I'm doing the Korban Mincha of a Korban Omer on a Shemitah year. So now that would be a problem. But what's the problem? Shvias Nami, Shekein Materes Sfichin. What's the problem with Shemitah? You're going to say because there's no permitted grain on Shemitah? So because I wasn't allowed to plant anything, so all the grain that was grown last year is prohibited, so there's nothing to, no, because we have what's called sfichim. When you don't do anything to your field, there are still some miscellaneous seeds and things that sprout. Anything that sprouts by itself during the Shemitah year can be eaten. And so therefore, the Korban Mincha of the Korban Omer is permitting the rest of the Sfichin, Bashvias. So maybe it's Rabbi Akiva. Maybe this is following Rabbi Akiva's opinion that Sfichin Asurim B'Shvias. He holds that Sfichin are actually prohibited on Shemitah. Therefore, this Korban HaOmer is permitting nothing. If the Korban HaOmer is permitting nothing, and the item itself is prohibited, so then why is it that you can use it? The answer is because clearly you can use something that's prohibited on the Mizbeach, and therefore that's prohibited for individuals as a korban, and therefore I need a special pasuk by Trefus.
Because it will be permitted later.
Well, no, because treif is never going to be permitted later, but this point is that there's nothing here for it to permit. By the Korban Omer, there's nothing, it's not permitting anything later because there's no grain that it's actually permitting. You have nothing to eat on Shemitah year. Everything that grew during the Shemitah year is absolutely prohibited to eat. You must buy from Chutz La'aretz. Yeah? So, Amar le Rav Acha bar Abba le Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha bar Abba says to Rav Ashi, le Rabbi Akiva nami lifroch. Yeah, but you could still ask according to Rabbi Akiva, ma leminchas ha'omer shekein materes chadash bechutz la'aretz. Oh well, the chadash korban still helps because we said, well, you're going to purchase stuff from outside of Eretz Yisrael. Shemitah is permissible, all the stuff that because there's Shemitah you're outside, but this is the point. There is a chadash. There's a yasham prohibition chutz la'aretz. So that's a problem, right? So therefore, there's a problem for us because There. So therefore, the korban is permitting. Okay, so the permitter here is, and this is where we'll hopefully get into maybe a little bit of explanation. There is an opinion that says chadash is prohibited, but it's only derabanan. Right, the Mishnah in Kedushin, Rabbi Elazar says chadash is noig b'chutz la'aretz min Torah, and the Tanakama says ein isur zed noig min Torah elo be'eretz Yisrael. Nevertheless, it's an isur derabanan in chutz la'aretz. It's not quite true. You still get around your isur derabanan in chutz la'aretz, but you don't need a korban to permit it. Is the point? Shekein bo lahatir lav shebesocha. So the answer is even still, this korban haomer may not be permitting any other barley, but it is permitting itself. Right? So therefore, this korban is permitting itself. Therefore, it's not the same thing as treifa, which comes for no purpose to permit anything. So your point was, hey, you know what? If I've got a korban that's made out of barley that I can't eat, so therefore I can bring a treifa that's made out of meat that I can't eat. You can't say that because the barley from the korban ha'omer is permitting itself. The treifa korban doesn't do anything. So that's not going to be a good kal v'chomer. Amar le Rav Achami Difti Ravina. Rav from Difti says Ravina Ihachi. If this is true that the Minchas HaOmer during the Shemitah year can be brought, right, even though it is prohibited for every individual to be eaten because it's going to permit itself, Treifa Nami Tikriv, you could bring the treifa also, Vitatir Lav She Besocha, and it should permit the prohibition that is within it. Now, here's where Tosfos and Rashi have a little bit of an argument, and Tosfos, I'll explain according to Tosfos because it seems like the clearer explanation. There are two problems in reality with eating this barley, according to Rabbi Akiva, right? The barley that I've just grown and harvested, it was grown during a Shemitah year, I can't eat it because it's Shemitah produce, and I can't eat it because it's Chadash. Says Tosfos, once it is a permitter, because it is my korban ha'omer, it not only permits the chadash, it also permits the shmita, and I can eat it. 100% no problem eating it. So therefore, says Rav Acha from Difti to Ravina, so then you should be able to bring the korban of the treifa, and even though a person could not be able to eat it, right, the treifa, right, the fact that it would be permissible to be brought as a korban should permit the treif aspect of it also. You see that things that are prohibited to be brought can permit other isurim that are attached to it. Rashi's a little difficult because Rashi says that even the korban omer is going to permit it from being yashan. It's not going to permit it to be eaten. It becomes only prohibited once. But then this question, Tosfos says, doesn't Rav Achami Difti's point is a little bit difficult. Because how could you bring a korban that's treif? Because even to say, okay, it's permitted to be brought as a korban, but it's still treif, so I still can't eat it. Says Rav Acham from Difti, he says, once you say it's acceptable to be brought as a korban, now that it's permissibly brought as a korban, it's also permitted to be eaten even though it's treif. Just like the Minchas HaOmer.
How can you eat something? How can someone make something treif permissible to eat? If you know if it's treif, it's treif.
Because the idea being that once something is a permitter, right, like the Korban HaOmer permits the eating of this grain, so therefore, if we say that this Korban is permitted to be brought as a treifa, then it could even overrule the other prohibition of eating it as a treifa. Right?
Sorry.
Yeah. It's a far-fetched thing, yes.
Josh,
That's
Josh,
right.
I'm with you.
It's a machlokas Rashi and Tosfos, yes.
I'm behind you. With this korban omer.
Yes.
So is it meant to be done with the
prohibited produce. It's meant to be done with new produce. So you take meaning the stuff that is from the previous year, right? That has not had a Pesach yet. Now it's Pesach. Now I'm using this prohibited grain. That act of using the prohibited grain in this korban permits it and all of the other grain that was permitted as well.
And in our case, the issue that we have is that you have in mind.
You have no permitted grain. There's no grain that's all Shemitah produce. This barley itself is Shemitah and it's Chadash. There's nothing else to it. So now, once I bring it as a korban, since I've brought it now, because I'm allowed to bring it as a korban, now it becomes permitted.
You as a Jew.
I'm sorry?
You as a Kohen or you as a Jew?
That would be me as saying me as a Kohen, I suppose, because would have to be as a
You're
Kohen.
not allowed to eat Shemitah, but you can use Shemitah for a korban.
So this would be part of the toast. This is why I said I'm going to explain it according to Tosfos to keep simple. The answer is once it becomes permitted, it's now permitted even as Shemitah. You can even eat it as well as Shemitah. It's going to remove all of the prohibitions.
Why would it do that? It has nothing to do with
That's probably why Rashi doesn't like it. Rashi, Tosfos says, right? He says, he says, Shekain bar lav shebesocha perish bekuntris shelo yavor ba'ochel shiari ha'omer mishum lav de chodosh. If you eat this korban ha'omer now, you're not going to violate chodosh ela mishum shvius. You're only violating shmita. He says, yeah, but zehu tema. That's astonishing. Im lo yatir omer isur shvius ikre kan mimashki Yisrael. If it was still prohibited because of shmita, how could it be a valid korban? It would violate our other problem of it being an invalid food for a korban. The Ode, Micah Parich. Second of all, how would you explain Rav Achmi Difti's next question about the treifa? Treifa nami tikrev lehateres lav shebesocha. Bring it as a korban, because what he seems to be implying is once you bring it as a korban, since it's permissible as a korban, it takes care of the treifa problem as well. Sheyochlu a korban shel treifa v'alo einu matir iser shvius v'lama yatir iser treifa. If the korban ha'omer doesn't remove the prohibition of shmita, why would the shchita of a korban animal remove the iser of treifa? It only seems to serve as a rule that once something is permitted to be brought as an offering, all prohibitions within that offering are removed magically. Somehow. Tosfos doesn't explain how that works. It's probably why Rashi doesn't hold like Tosfos, right? They explain how does the Shemitah go away? I understand how the Chodesh goes away because that is what the Korban Omer is for. How does Shemitah disappear? What is Rav Achami Difti suggesting? The animal's not a treifa anymore? What he's suggesting is once the Torah tells me that this is permitted, then whatever problems you had with it are gone. Doesn't matter whatever they were. So if I could bring a Korban HaOmer from Shemitah produce and eat it, then I could bring a korban from a treifa animal and eat it too. Why should that be a problem? But the answer is, Ella, I'll tell you why that doesn't work, because Parachachi, you asked this question. When it comes to a korban omer, it has to be done that way. It's a Shemitah year. It's barley. Where are you getting barley during a Shemitah year? It has to be freshly grown barley, right? It even says in the pasuk, lach, it has to be fresh barley. So therefore, you have no other way other than to use Shemitah produce, and that's chadash. Nobody's forcing you to use a treifa animal. I'll just get a different animal.
But during Shemitah, I don't think during Shemitah is like every 7 years. We like the Shabbos for the fields. How can you use something that's Shemitah as a korban if it's
when it's because
The problem is, what else could you use? Nothing.
that's right. So therefore, that's what we say. Mitzvah sabekach means there's no other choice. That's why you can use it and you can eat it.
Why you could use previous year's barley.
No, you cannot, because it says in the Torah that the procedure is you must harvest it and you must use fresh, and it must be freshly harvested. That's part of the process.
You could get it from Chutz La'aretz.
Which you couldn't either. The pasuk even says that, right?
That's it.
Took them all by the Korban Omer. The Korban Omer tells us that it has to be done, right? Has to be cut there. They even made a whole celebration. The people came out and they watched the harvesting of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Good luck next time.
So we'll just go a little bit further, right? Reish Lakish says, Mishum de'ikal lemeimar mifatem k'haktoris yochiach. We'll talk about what about somebody who's doing the ketoris. So the ketoris, that's the proof. She'asur lehedyot umuter legavoa. It is permitted for it's prohibited for a individual, but it's permitted for Hashem. So Mefatem Gavrahu, what are you talking about? It's permitted for Hashem. The way that just sounded was it's permitted for Hashem to make the Ketores and it's not permitted for a person to make Ketores. No, what it means, Ella, what we meant to say is Pitum HaKetores Yochiach She'aser Lehedyot Mutter Legavoa. We mean that the Ketores, once it is made, cannot be used by an individual person. It's prohibited, it's hektish. But the Ketores can be used for the Ketores. So therefore, you have another example, like treifa, something that is prohibited for a person to use, but it's okay in the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah, but again, That doesn't prove anything because the same answer. That's the way. You have no alternative. It has to be something which is for Hashem and not for a person. Mar Breder Ravina says, Mishum de'ika lemeimar Shabbos tochiach. What about Shabbos? Malach on Shabbos. Asura lehedyot, a person, individual, can't do malach on Shabbos. Muteres legavo, but you could do malach on the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. You bring korbanos.
Why is that?
Because the Torah tells us to bring korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. How are you doing that? Yeah, but Malat Shabbos Shekain Hutra Miklala Eitzel Hedyot B'Mila. Shabbos isn't a good proof. Shabbos can be violated for individuals. What if you have a bris milah on Shabbos?
Okay, but emergency.
Emergency would be a good answer too, right? But that might not be a great answer because we might say it's not that Shabbos is pushed off. It's just that you have a extreme positive commandment of saving someone's life, which overrides. But a bris milah says Shabbos, you have to do a bris milah on Shabbos, right? To milah tzorech hedyotu. Wait a second. That doesn't mean that's. Milah isn't for an individual's purpose. Milah is a mitzvah. Milah mitzvahi. So that doesn't indicate.
You can't do a mitzvah, bris mitzvah on Shabbos because you're causing a mum on a child.
That is the problem, right? But nevertheless, but that's a mitzvah. So that's tzarech gavoa. So there isn't a circumstance where you can violate Shabbos for an individual. The answer is that's just the way it is. You have no choice. There's no way to bring a korban tamid for Shabbos or a korban muslim for Shabbos unless it's on Shabbos. Therefore, you have to do it that way. So that doesn't prove anything by treifa where you have another choice.
You don't have a problem with that answer? Mila is a mitzvah. It's still tzorech hedget.
Is it?
Isn't it?
That's that's the question. How do you view your mitzvah? Is a mitzvah tzorech hedyot or tzorech gavoha? Right? One must answer from here, right? That the answer to that is it's got to be tzorech gavoha, right? That's otherwise what's the answer?
Yeah, but the Gemara, or just 2 lines earlier, said Shabbos is not the gavoa. Shabbos was...
No, we said we're violating Shabbos, right? We can't violate Shabbos. We can violate Shabbos. Can't violate Shabbos lehedyot, but I can violate Shabbos legavoa. Shabbos is not the mitzvah that we're talking about. Shabbos is the prohibition.
We said Shabbos tochiach sha'asura lehedyot.
Right, you
Muteres legavoa.
It's
Shabbos is a mitzvah.
Just as it's like the yes, but we're not looking at it as the mitzvah. Shabbos is like the ketores, right? The ketores cannot be used by an individual, but it can be used for a korban. Shabbos cannot be violated by an individual, but it can be violated for korbanos. So too, right? So but we can violate Shabbos for mitzvos, not for individual purpose. Nevertheless, the reason why we can violate Shabbos is because we have no choice. Rav Acha bar Abba says, Mishum de'ikal member, because you can say, Kil ayim yochichu, we can learn from shatnez, right? She'asurin lehedyot, a person, individual person can't wear shatnez, but mutarin legavoa, the big day kahuna, have the avnate of the Kohen has shatnez in it.
Wearing shatnez is a nevera.
That's right, but nevertheless, for the big day Kohen, it's okay.
Why is that?
Because the Torah says so. Yeah, but we can't prove anything from shatnez because you can wear tzitzis that are shatnez also. If you have a garment made out of linen, you can put wool tzitzis on it, and that's not a violation of shatnez.
Don't they have to be
Woven together.
Even if they're tied on apparently in a permanent way,
really?
Right? If I have a linen beged with wool tzitzis, it should be prohibited. Nevertheless, it is not. Yeah, but atu tzitzis tzorech hedyotu. Tzitzis is not a personal thing. That's mitzvahi. It's a mitzvah again. Ella malakil ayim shek mitzvasu bekach. We've got to say kilayim. That's the mitzvah. So therefore, we have no choice. Right? That's the only way you could do this commandment. Okay, we'll stop here.
Shoya. Beautiful.
Minus Shabbos, right?
Yes.
No, Rav Shisha.
Rav Shisha.
Berator of Idi Amar.
Oops.
Okay, before we depart this evening, we have one bit of housekeeping business to take care of.
Okay.
So this Shabbos will Misham be the 6th Siyam we'll be doing since we have begun learning together. I don't count Bava Basra, but we sort of joined in, sort of like, a little bit late in the game.
I get that, yes.
We had the Sanhedrin,
Makos,
Shavuos, Avodah Horius, and Zvachim. The biggest Masechta that we've encountered so far.
If you call Horus Masechta, because how short it is.
I call it a Masechta.
It's a Masechta.
I call it a Masechta.
That was a joke.
Don't bash Hori.
The esteemed
That was a joke.
the esteemed Kahal Yereim Board of Directors feels this is an opportune time to express our extreme, of course it's up to you, Rabbi Loiterman, for the energy, the effort, the erudition that you put into this incredible shiur and the enormous contribution that you make to the shul. And we appreciate it so much. So we got you a little something.
Aw.
It's similar to what we presented last time.
That's beautiful.
We're sending you somewhere else.
Very good.
A
love this.
place that Yehuda is very familiar with, actually. Down on Eglinton. We're sending you down to Eglinton this time.
Very good.
It's warmer down there, exactly. So yeah, on behalf of the Rav and the board of directors, the entire shul, we thank you so much, and we look forward to many more seeing together.
This is very appreciated. The reward is the daf itself.
Yeah.
But this is also very good. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. This is amazing stuff. Amazing. Awesome.